All right, let's talk about Etsy ads and Etsy promoted ads. There's still a lot of confusion around these two advertising platforms within Etsy. So I want to break down the two so that you guys know the difference between them and some important information so you don't get basically waste a lot of money and get caught up in something that you're not familiar with and not sure how to operate. So the goal is to be the most profitable with your Etsy business, and this will surely help do that. If you don't know who I am, I'm LL, founder of handmadeandbeyond.com, a platform and community to help other Etsy sellers start, build, and grow their businesses with less frustration, less time, and be more successful faster. So let's dive in. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is Etsy ads. So Etsy ads are within Etsy only. So these are basically your listings being advertised and promoted within the Etsy platform only, not outside of the platform. I'm going to talk about promoted ads next, but the first is just Etsy ads. So these are your listings within Etsy. You go to the marketing tab and you can turn these on and turn these off and decide to advertise with a specific budget. So with Etsy ads, you have full control over what is advertised. So you have your listings, right? However many listings you have, and you can decide to advertise or not advertise all or some of these listings. So it depends what you want to do here. I would recommend, here's a little pro tip warning for you. If you decide to start advertising within Etsy ads, advertise all your listings, not just some of them, because you'll be surprised at which ones do well, and some of the ones that do well organically don't do as well when advertised. So it's and vice versa. So it's kind of weird. So you have full control over which listings you can advertise. You can do some of them, all of them, turn some off as you go. The ones that aren't as profitable, you can start turning them off. So you have full control. You have full control over the budget, the amount of money that you spend. Now, when you first start advertising, Etsy will give you a smaller cap. I'm not sure what that is. I think it really depends on you as a seller, your profile, but they basically give you a cap. So let's just say it's 25 bucks or 50 bucks. They'll cap it. So you won't be able to spend more than that per day. I know that seems like a lot, but some people do spend a lot. So if it's, say your cap's 50 bucks when you first start, that's the most you can spend per day. And then as you progress, they will start increasing the cap. So maybe you'll go in there in a couple of weeks, then it's 75 bucks, then it's 100, then it's 150. So they'll keep raising the cap. And I don't know if there is a cap to the cap, no pun intended, but I'm not sure. I haven't spent more than I don't think 150 bucks a day. That's where I've capped myself out when I've tested this. So a lot of it depends on how many listings you have. If you have a lot of listings, you could spend a lot more because it gets spread out among all of your listings. So if you have 1,000 listings and you're spending $5 a day, that's super small. I mean, that's a minuscule budget for that amount of listings. So how much you're spending per day should also be factored into your daily budget depending on how many listings you have. So that should be a factor. The other thing is to keep in mind with your budget is you pay this no matter if something sells or not. So if you're spending 50 bucks a day, you will spend, if you have that set, Etsy will take, it may not take all 50, but it'll take close. Maybe you'll spend 45, maybe you'll spend 48. It'll be close to that. So be prepared. If you're spending that per day, be prepared for Etsy to take that, regardless of whether you sell anything or not. So that's something that I think people don't realize is you could spend 50 bucks a day for a month and not have any sales. Just because you're advertising doesn't mean you're going to get sales. There's a lot of other factors at play. Another pro tip here, if you're not getting organic sales and you advertise, you're probably not going to get any sales that way either. Something is wrong with your shop. Something is broken. Fix that. Get organic sales before you ever start advertising, because this is just going to waste you money. It's not going to fix. Advertising doesn't fix a dumpster fire of a listing, right? Just some real talk here for you. So if you have a dumpster fire of a listing and it's not selling or getting traffic organically, when you start advertising it, you're just then going to pay Etsy to advertise a garbage listing that no one's going to buy. So keep that in mind. The last thing here is, you have full control over a lot of aspects of this. Inside the platform, the Etsy Ads platform, you can actually also toggle on keywords. So Etsy will use the keywords in your listing to push out and advertise to people looking, to potential buyers, and it'll have a list of those keywords, and you can toggle those keywords on and off. So make sure you're looking at that, because they will have keywords in there that are not relevant sometimes, and you're like, I don't want that being shown to people looking for those keywords, so I'm going to toggle that off, because if it's not a relevant keyword, that's the wrong audience, and those people aren't going to buy. It doesn't matter if there's a lot of them or not. It's not going to buy. You know, for just a crazy off the wall example, if you're selling a pendant necklace and you have a keyword in there that's like art or diamond art painting or something like that, it's never going to be that extreme, but you would toggle that off. Don't keep that on there. All right, so those are the biggest. That's Etsy Ads. So now I'm going to compare that to promoted listings. You're going to kind of really start to see the difference between the two. All right, offsite ads. I think I said promoted listings or something earlier. I misspoke. I was saying it wrong. So correct me in the comments if you want to. If you didn't get this far, I'm sure you're going to hear about it. All right, so offsite ads. So the biggest difference with offsite ads, it's offsite. It's outside of Etsy. So Etsy is partnering with, Google, Facebook, Bing to push your listings outside. They're going to show up in those search engines and those places, and then people have the opportunity to buy outside of Etsy. So it's not inside of Etsy. Now you have some control of offsite ads, maybe, right? So if you make less than $10,000 in a rolling 365-day period, it's not a year, it's rolling, it keeps going. So if you make less than $10,000 in a rolling 365-day period, you can choose to opt in or not. You can choose that. Etsy will give you the options. You can opt out, you can opt in. Etsy will automatically opt you in, but then you can go in there into your stats tab and then opt out if you want. Now, if you make more than $10,000, you're automatically opted in. And this is what people get butthurt about. It is what it is. You're automatically opted in. You have no control. You cannot opt yourself out. Now, here's where it gets interesting. When you are doing offsite ads, you cannot control your listings. You can't control your budget. Etsy picks and chooses which listings they're going to push out to these platforms, and they're going to test different listings out. The other big part of this is really the fees, right? The cost of this could be up to 15%. 15% fee tacked on to all the other Etsy fees. So there's the listing, the 20-cent listing fee, the 5.5% final value fee, or it's not called a final value fee, transaction fee. So processing fee, 3%. So this is tacked on. This is in addition to the other listing fees. But it's up to 15%. It may not be that. Now here's how they get. Here's the two scenarios. So if you make less than $10,000 in a rolling 365-day period, it is going to be up to 15%. If you make more than $10,000, it's going to be up to 12%. So it's a little bit less if you make more money. You're like, well, if I make more money, I need it to be less. Well, it's kind of like, if you have a high credit score, you get better interest rates than if you have a low credit score, you get higher interest rates. So they're basically giving you an incentive to make more money on the platform. So it's up to these amounts. So in my experience, it's usually never 15%, 12%. It usually comes in much lower than that, usually like 6%, 5%, in my experience. But the other thing with this is you only pay if something sells. Unlike Etsy Ads, where you pay regardless, you only pay a fee if something sells. So that's a pretty big perk because there's no risk really. You don't have any control, but there's no risk. You only pay if something sells. So that is a pretty big plus. And so it's just something to keep in mind if you are doing this or you're automatically opted in. The other thing, I'm going to talk about this a little bit more, but usually for offsite ads, the return on ad spend, the ROAS, is a lot better. I don't know if that's just for my niche, but based on my experience, and some of my other students are seeing the same things. So just keep that in mind too. These are a little bit more profitable usually, and it's probably because they have more control. So it kind of takes they have a lot of more technology behind them, a lot more resources. So they're only putting out listings to these platforms that they know are probably going to sell or have a higher likelihood of selling. The other thing to keep in mind with offsite ads is it's not going to be a lot. You're not going to get a lot of sales. So it's not going to ever blow up. It's going to be a couple of sales a month at max, because they're very selective with what listings they put out there. And again, for good reason. They want to put out listings that actually have a high probability of selling. So they are not wasting their money since they're taking all the front end risk. All right, let's talk about ROAS, return on ad spend. So this is what you have to keep in mind when you're advertising anywhere. So here's a crash course on return on ad spend. So basically what this simply means in simple terms is the amount of money you earn for how much you spend. So basically it's the revenue that you earn for every dollar spent on advertising. So just for example, if you're advertising a listing and you made $130 off that listing, but it costs you $25 in advertising costs. I'm just talking advertising costs. I'm not talking about fees or anything. Keep it simple. Basically, you would take, to figure out your return on ad spend, you would basically take your revenue and divide it by the money that you spent on advertising, which for this scenario, it would be 5.2. So this basically means for every dollar you spend in advertising, you got $5.20 back. That's pretty good. I'll take that all day long if I have a 5 to 1 ratio. So that's how you figure out your return on ad spend. Now, to give you kind of a benchmark here, the average return, the industry average return on ad spend is about 3. So for every dollar you spend, you get $3 back. So that should be your gauge, your starting point to figure out if you're doing a good job, especially with Etsy ads. Where you have control, figure out and keep an eye on your return on ad spend there, so if you are performing well. Because some people, it may seem like a lot. If you're not used to advertising, you're like, man, I'm spending $25 to make $130. That seems like a lot. But just know that you're at a 5 to 1 ratio. You're doing pretty good. But no, if you do, if it's different, if you're at like if you're making $2 for every dollar spent, not so good, depending on your profit margins and how much it costs you to make your stuff with all the other fees in there. That may not be good for you. But if your margins are very high, if you're making 80, if you have like 80% profit margin, which is really kind of unheard of, that may be fine for you. That may be a good return on ad spend. So just keep that in mind and make sure you're keeping an eye on your return on ad spend. So now you guys know the difference between Etsy ads and offsite ads, or as I said earlier, promoted ads, but I meant offsite ads. And return on ad spend, so you can keep an eye and gauge your stuff to make sure it is profitable. The other kind of keys to success with this is don't make frequent changes, especially with Etsy ads, because this can really affect how they perform. A lot of people will advertise, they pick a daily budget, they start spending a lot of money because it starts adding up quick, and they're like, crap, I'm going to change my budget every day, I'm going to turn off listings, turn on listings. It's going to mess with the algorithm. Make changes on a 30-day rolling period. Keep it easy, keep it simple. When you pick a daily budget, be committed to that, let it ride, and then manage it on a 30-day period. After that 30 days, you can start turning off, sorting by listings that are eating up most of your budget that aren't selling. Start turning those off, and then let it ride for another 30 days so you can kind of hit the sweet spot. The other thing to keep in mind with Etsy ads is best sellers don't always perform when advertised. So your organic sellers, when advertised, sometimes don't perform. Sometimes they will, sometimes they won't. And other listings that aren't bestsellers or aren't selling a lot will sometimes perform better when advertised. So this is why you start with all the listings, advertise all your listings, and then you start turning off the ones that aren't performing after 30 days. So that's kind of the simplest way to kind of approach this if you do decide to start Etsy ads. Now with offsite ads, again, you don't have really much control. If you have the option to opt in or opt out, and then you opt in and opt out, turn them on and off, same thing could happen. So don't do that. But most of you, at some point are gonna, hopefully will not have the option to opt in or opt out. If you do have, I would say with offsite ads, definitely give it a try. There's a lot of, again, the return on ad spend is usually really good. So if you have the option to opt in, give it a try. See how it performs for you. It may get you a couple extra sales a month, but again, you have to take into account, plan for the worst case scenario, the 15% on top of the other Etsy fees. It's just to make sure that there's still wiggle room for you so you're not losing money. That's really key. And this is why this kind of goes back to profit margin and then making sure your niche and your setup has at least a high, I would say hopefully at least 40-50% profit margin, because if you get lower than that and you take all this other stuff into account, it's gonna be really hard to stay profitable and actually make money. And that is business across the board. I know people want to bash Etsy. No matter where you sell, no where you do business, you need to know your profit margin and take that into account and take the other fees and things and expenses into account. That's going to come into play. So hopefully that helps you out. Hopefully that gives you a good understanding of all the ways to advertise on Etsy. And the key takeaway is just to make sure you're doing it in a strategic way that's not losing you money.